The courthouse buzzed with hysteria, hours before Kody Brown set foot within. Journalists pushed against metal barriers, their shouts echoing through the clear morning air. Camera flashes exploded like lightning, filming each step of spectators, each rumor of scandal, each face that promised drama. When at last the huge glass doors opened and Kody stepped out, the tempest reached a full rage. His presence was heavy, not the measured dignity he used to project on TV, but something more, a combination of defiance and desperation. His jaw was tight, hair pushed back as if hastily combed, and his eyes skipped, revealing the nervousness he attempted to conceal. Questions came at him from all sides. "Mr. Brown, do you believe your son is guilty? Is it true you used church money to fund covert accounts? Are your wives ready to testify against you? Is this about faith? Or is it about finances?" Security needed to create a buffer around him, helping him up the stairs into the courthouse. Behind him followed his 4 wives, each a storm cloud unto herself. Mary strode with stiff, purposeful steps, her expression locked, refusing to look at the cameras. Janelle had her eyes cast down, holding onto her handbag as if it was a shield for her. Christine was white, shaken, each step uncertain, as if a woman shouldered both grief and shame. Robin, the youngest, stood her chin high and glared at the reporters with defiance, her protectively gripping her purse strap as if challenging anyone to get too close. They did not walk together. They walked apart, each of them divided not only by the physical space that had come between them, but by the emotional chasms etched over years of competition, despair, and tenuous pacts. Their chairs within the courtroom reflected that same fissure. 4 women seated in one row, but with those tiny spaces that spoke more than words could ever say. Daniel sat at the front of the courtroom. His youth, fleeting, held onto him in the anxious drumming of his fingers and the agitated changing of positions. He was Kody's son, but today he seemed less the son of a patriarch and more a man about to break. His defense lawyer sat beside him, reminding him quietly, "Breathe, stay steady, don't shatter." Daniel attempted, but his gaze kept darting back to the gallery, to where his mothers were sitting. For an instant, his eyes locked onto Christine's. Her mouth quivered as she attempted to force a smile, but the attempt faltered into despair. The prosecutor rose, straightening his tie with the quiet confidence of a man who had waited years to make this moment. He allowed the silence in the room to build, relishing the tension of it before he started. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he announced, his voice clear, firm, and measured. "Today you will be listening to the tale of a family familiar to the world as pioneers of faith, harmony, and sacrifice. But behind that facade is something else: control, manipulation, and betrayal. This case is not about the lifestyle that a family elects to adopt. It is about money. It is about authority. And it is about a conspiracy to hide both." He strode slowly in front of the jury box, his finely polished shoes ticking across the floor, each step deliberate. "The defendant, Daniel Brown, stands charged with masterminding a scheme involving fraudulent multiple transfers, secret bank accounts, and forged documents. He stands charged with taking funds intended for group use and directing them to accounts that could not be traced until today." The jurors sat with intent, gaze piercing, fingers on top of their notepads. The gallery at their back hummed with contained murmurs, but the judge immediately quieted the room by thumping down her gavel sharply. The prosecutor went on, pointing at Daniel. "He is here today as the defendant. But as we will demonstrate, he was not alone. There were orders, pressure, coercion. There was a guiding hand behind these acts, and that hand belonged to someone sitting in this very courtroom." The words seemed to hang in the air. Reporters wrote quickly, pens scratching against paper like insects. Cameras leaned forward to capture the expressions. Daniel pressed his lips together, head in his hands. Kody, sitting just a few feet away, shifted uncomfortably but kept his eyes on the floor, refusing to blink. The prosecutor lifted a stout pile of paper and held it high. "You will find documents, bank records, authorization forms, transfers that flowed through several layers before vanishing into obscurity. And on some of them you will find signatures. Not only the defendant's, but others. You will discover patterns which suggest not a son acting in isolation, but a system designed to cover those at the apex. Christine's breath froze. Janelle blinked, her eyes glazed. Mary folded her arms tightly, while Robin frowned at the prosecutor, shaking her head subtly as though repudiating each word. But before we set out the evidence, the prosecutor then said, leaning the papers onto the table, I want to make one thing certain. This case is not about religion. It is not about marriage choices in one's personal life. This case is about fraud. This case is about breach of trust. And this case is about how far a man was prepared to go to maintain control. He paused deliberately, leaning closer to the jury. We have discovered secret accounts tied directly to Kody Brown. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even the most seasoned reporters snapped their heads up, their cameras clicking faster. Daniel's attorney sat up straighter, visibly rattled. The wives' row shifted like a wave. Christine covering her mouth, Janelle's head jerking toward Kody, Mary's eyes narrowing, and Robin whispering fiercely under her breath. Kody at last shifted his gaze, his eyes locking with the prosecutor's. There was a moment when it seemed as if the air in the room itself had been drawn out. The patriarch's expression was unreadable, chiseled out of stone, but his tight fists betrayed him. The judge ordered the room to fall silent, but the room had already changed. The case wasn't just about Daniel anymore. It was about Kody. It was about whether or not the patriarch who had constructed his entire existence on family togetherness and dominance now sat at the helm of its destruction. Reporters scrambled out of the room to write their initial headlines, speaking into telephones in the hushed tones of a breaking story. Secret accounts linked to Kody Brown, they murmured, their voices carrying down the hall. Within, the family remained in stunned silence, the cornerstone of their public persona shattering with each passing moment. Daniel went white, his lips muttering something inaudible. His lawyer put a hand on his shoulder, attempting to support him. The prosecutor retreated behind his table. His words said for the time being, the defense would have their say shortly, but the damage had already been inflicted. The judge glanced over her spectacles at the courtroom, her gavel coming down hard. Order, we will continue. But for the family, for the wives who had obeyed Kody blindly in the past, for the son who cowered under the burden of betrayal, the trial had already changed. The issue was no longer whether or not Daniel was guilty. The issue was whether Kody Brown himself was on the verge of enduring the tempest. And as the first witness was set to come in, the eyes all turned to the patriarch whose secrets had just been brought to the forefront. The cliffhanger lingered there, charged, impossible to forget. Secret accounts linked directly to Kody Brown. The family's saga, once coiffed so prettily for the television cameras, had splintered into a courtroom drama that held out only ruin for the future. The courtroom itself was colder the following morning. Or maybe it was only the mood of those who sat within. The atmosphere was thick with whispers, the scratch of pens, the buzz of the cameras beyond the double doors. Everyone understood that yesterday's suggestion that confidential accounts could be connected directly to Kody Brown was just the tip of it. Today the prosecution threatened proof. Today the facade would be lifted yet again, and the family that once earned its living, peddling the illusion of harmony, would see its most intimate fissures thrust into the light. The wives came in succession, as if strangers pushed into proximity. Janelle stepped first, practical to the end, a pile of papers pushed against her chest. Her skin was ashen, but her gait was solid. The same serene composure she'd always had when juggling household finances and family schedules. Christine trailed behind, her pace slower, her arms grasping the railing as if balancing against an unseen load. Mary strode stiffly, lips pursed, her eyes directed straight ahead. Robin brought up the rear, rebellious, chin high, her eyes raking the room as if challenging others to do otherwise. They sat again, 4 women tied together by law and fate, but the space between them had never been wider. Reporters had filled every row behind them, pencils poised, cameras at the ready. They craved drama, and they would have it. The prosecutor stood up. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he started. Yesterday we set before you the notion that Daniel Brown did not work alone. Today you will learn of the finances of this family. You will witness how money was managed, how money was spent, and who actually called the shots. He nodded to the bailiff, who summoned the first witness, Janelle Brown. Janelle pushed her glasses up as she approached the stand, her placid demeanor hiding the tempest raging within. She brought her hand up, swore the oath, and sat down, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Mrs. Brown, the prosecutor started out. You took care of a lot of the household finances in your household, yes? Yes, Janelle replied. I dealt with grocery budgets, household spending, things like that, and financial records. She paused, then nodded. I helped manage bills. I made spreadsheets to keep it all together. The prosecutor walked over and handed her a sheet of paper. Is this one of your spreadsheets? She looked at it, her lips compressing. Yes, it's mine. Can you tell me what this indicates? Her eyes darted toward Kody, who sat stiff, fixed, straight ahead. It indicates allocations, how funds came in, how they were divided between the households. Did you have control over those decisions? She shook her head. No, I just logged what I was instructed to. Kody made the choices. And did you ever argue with him? I tried. A faint bitterness crept into her voice. But he told me not to worry about things I didn't know about. He said it was complicated, that I should just keep track of the numbers. Her voice caught slightly, and she cleared her throat. I stopped asking after a while. The prosecutor let the silence linger. Then he thanked her and turned back to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just heard from the woman responsible for managing expenses. She had the skill, the organization, the knowledge, but no authority. Every financial decision went through Kody Brown. The defense attorney stood to cross-examine. Mrs. Brown, isn't it a fact that you admired Kody's means, that you trusted his judgments? Janelle paused, then replied. Once, I trusted him. But did you ever see him steal? No, she acknowledged. I saw items go missing, money that went unaccounted for. A shiver moved through the gallery. When Christine was summoned next, she was not the same, less controlled, more genuine. She gripped the witness stand as if it were the only thing holding her upright. Mrs. Brown, the prosecutor started gently. Can you describe your involvement in family finances? Christine's voice broke on the first syllable. I didn't have a role. I wasn't given one. She blinked fiercely, eyes brimming at the corners. When I asked, I was told to let the men handle business. My role was the kids, the house, the food, not the money. And who said that? Her gaze flicked to Kody, then back to the prosecutor. Kody did, many times. Did you ever wonder where money went? Yes, she whispered. I saw things. I questioned one time why the accounts looked lighter, why there was not enough to pay for something we'd budgeted. He became angry. He said I was sabotaging him. Her hands shook as she clutched them closer. I didn't question any more after that. The prosecutor paused, allowing her words to register, and then said, so you did not have a say in how the finances of the family were managed? None, replied Christine, her voice cracking. I felt like we lived in a system where there was only one who could make decisions, and it wasn't Daniel. Mary trailed behind. While Janelle was solid and Christine was breakable, Mary was ice. She strode to the stand with sharp deliberation, face unreadable. Mrs. Brown, the prosecutor started out. What was your part in financial decisions? I didn't have one, she replied bluntly. Did you trust your husband's decisions? She regarded a point in front of her, lips curling slightly. Trust isn't the word I'd use. What word would you use? Control, she replied harshly. Kody controlled everything. He dictated what we could have, what we couldn't. We were instructed to accept it. We weren't allowed to question him. The jury shifted uncomfortably in their seats, visibly taken aback by the austerity. When Robin testified, the mood changed again. She was different from the others, emitting a sense of loyalty, her voice unyielding, her eyes flashing with conviction. Mrs. Brown, the prosecutor began. You feel Kody was a protector of the family? Yes, she responded immediately. He bore the weight no one else would bear. He handled everything so we wouldn't have to. That's not control, it's responsibility. Even when cash disappeared, she moved forward. If money was transferred, there was a reason. Kody does not steal from his family. he gives for it. The juxtaposition of her evidence with the others was stark. The jury scribbled hasty notes, their pens scratching wildly. When Robin stepped down, the prosecutor returned to the jury, his eyes sharp. You have now heard from all 4 wives. 3 describe a man who held absolute control. 1 defends him as a protector. But control and protection often look very much alike. The question is, who benefited when the money disappeared? He leaned over to pick up a file and pull a sheet of paper out from it. This, he stated, is a statement of an overseas bank account, and it is in Daniel Brown's name. But take a closer look. He put the paper on the projector screen so everyone could read it. The name Daniel Brown, the account number, the date, and below that, 2 signatures. One belongs to Daniel, the prosecutor said. The other belongs to Kody Brown. Gasps filled the courtroom. The wives froze. Christine's hand flying to her mouth. Janelle staring wide-eyed. Mary's lips tightening to a thin line. Robin shook her head violently, whispering, "No, no, that's not real." Daniel lowered his head, tears threatening to fall. Kody clenched his fists tighter, his knuckles white. The prosecutor's voice rose above the commotion. This account holds hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was opened in Daniel's name, but on Kody Brown's authorization. This is not the work of a son alone. This is the work of a patriarch manipulating. The gavel came down, demanding order, but the damage was already done. The courtroom had tipped once more. Daniel was no longer the center of attention. The shadow had stretched out, falling squarely across his father. And as the judge took the bench for the day to end, the cliffhanger hung suspended like thunder in the distance. An unknown foreign account, carrying not only Daniel's name, but Kody's signature. The Browns' private world had been opened up, and the tempest was just starting to rage. The courtroom was subdued, but far from quiet. Tension hummed through the air like an electric current, buzzing over the paneled wood and off the unforgiving stone floors. Kody Brown's wives sat in a row that resembled less of a family bound together and more of a fractured coalition stuck together in the same room. All of them carried their own armor. Janelle with her guarded cool, Christine with her shattering fragility, Mary with her honed coldness, and Robin with her steadfast defiance. Today they would not be silent bystanders. Today they would make their voices heard. The prosecutor stood up, fastening his jacket with a deliberate action. He looked at the jury, then at the women. Ladies and gentlemen, the cornerstone of this family has always been marketed to you as harmony. But harmony is not what you will hear today. What you will hear are fractures. Fractures that show the reality of who held the money, and who was punished for it. He addressed the bailiff. "Call Janelle Brown." Janelle stepped forward to the witness stand with hesitant steps, as if each step bore the burden of memories she would prefer to keep buried. Her hand went up for the oath, her voice firm as she promised to tell the truth. Once she sat down, she interlocked her fingers on her lap, her knuckles white. "Mrs. Brown," the prosecutor said, "you've already testified to keeping spreadsheets of the money. I'd like to delve a little further. Did you ever have the idea that something was amiss with the handling of money?" Janelle hesitated, her gaze flicking fleetingly over to Kody. He was sitting rigid, staring straight ahead, his face unreadable. "Yes," she admitted at last. "I suspected." "What did you suspect?" "That money was vanishing," she said guardedly. "Occasionally cash was transferred from one account to another, and I had no idea why. I'd follow it up, but when I questioned it, I was told it was none of my business." "By whom?" "By Kody." "And did you ever confront him about it?" Her lips tightened. "Not directly. I was being careful. I had witnessed what happened when Christine questioned things. I knew it would only lead to more tension." "Though you kept records?" "Yes," she replied assertively. "I kept them because someone needed to know where things were headed, even if I wasn't permitted to question why." The prosecutor nodded, pleased. The defense stood to cross-examine. "Mrs. Brown, isn't it true that you had faith in your husband's leadership of the family?" Janelle took a breath, and then let it out again. "I did. But trust isn't blind. I kept records because I couldn't afford to be blind." Her words lingered in the air. The prosecutor leaned forward. "Thank you, Mrs. Brown. No further questions." When Christine was summoned, Her attitude was a simple reverse. She shuffled unsteadily onto the stand, her trembling hands closing around the wooden railing. The oath stuck in her throat, but she forced the words past her, her voice shaking. Mrs. Brown, the prosecutor started gently. Did you ever notice your son Daniel to be dealing money for the family? Christine nodded hastily, tears already welling up. Yes, too many times. He was such a young man, and he wanted to be proud of his father. Kody told him what to do, and he obeyed. What do you mean by told him what to do? Kody would write to him with orders. Christine broke in. Transfers, deposits. Occasionally late at night, occasionally when he ought to have been asleep. Daniel would sit at the table with papers all over, attempting to understand it all. And when I questioned him, he just said, "Dad needs me to do this." And what did he sound like when he said that? Her tears overflowed. Scared, pressured, like he couldn't say no. The jury leaned forward, pencils scratching wildly. The prosecutor gave Christine a moment to collect herself before asking, "Mrs. Brown, do you think Daniel acted on his own free will?" "No," she whispered. "He acted on his father's pressure." The defense attorney stood up fast, his voice snapping. "Mrs. Brown, you're emotional, aren't you? You want to defend your son." "Yes," she replied, wiping at her eyes. "I want to save him because nobody else would." The courtroom was still, the words hanging like an accusation against not the lawyer but the man sitting at the defense table. Kody's jaw clenched, but he did not stir. Then came Mary. Christine was fragile glass, but Mary was steel. She strode purposefully, her heels clicking on the floor like a drumbeat. She lifted her hand, spoke the oath with precision, and sat back in her chair, her back ramrod straight, and her eyes piercing. "Mrs. Brown," the prosecutor started, "what would you say about Kody's participation in the family finances?" She smiled weakly, but the smile lacked humor. He was the king. He determined where the money went, who received what and when. We weren't financial partners, we were subjects. There was a ripple of shock through the gallery. The prosecutor leaned forward. "Did you know more about these accounts than the others?" Mary's gaze flickered, then hardened. "Let's just say I listened. I wasn't going to get blindsided. Kody didn't trust me, and I didn't trust him, but I knew enough to know Daniel wasn't doing this alone." The prosecutor's brow rose. "You're saying you think Kody masterminded the financial decisions?" "I'm saying nothing was done without his approval," she said, her voice frosty. The defense jumped in, his voice sharp. "Mrs. Brown, isn't it true that you've been estranged from Kody for years? That you hold resentment against him?" Her lips curled. Resentment doesn't change facts. The tension snapped like a whip, leaving the courtroom buzzing. Finally Robin was called. She rose with defiance, her eyes blazing, her steps firm. She swore the oath with conviction, and sat tall, her voice ringing clear. "Mrs. Brown," the prosecutor asked, "do you feel Kody controlled the finances?" She stated firmly. "He bore the weight. That's not control, that's leadership." "And the money that went missing?" "There were always excuses," she snapped. "You're manipulating things. Kody doesn't steal, he protects. He took risks for us. The system is piling it on him because of who we are." Her energy charged the air, contrasting with the more subdued notes of the other wives. The jury wrote frantically, torn by the contradictions. The prosecutor sat back. "You're denying that Kody bullied Daniel then?" "Yes," Robin seethed. "Daniel made decisions. If he's in hot water, it's not due to Kody. It's because people want to destroy our family." They sounded like a challenge, but they also deepened the rift. 4 wives, 4 accounts, 4 truths. The courtroom no longer felt like a forum of order but a war zone of loyalty and treachery, with the jury being witnesses to every break. As the day wound down, the judge called for a recess. The wives returned to their seats, but the space between them seemed wider than ever. Janelle looked weary, Christine was pale and drained, Mary's expression unreadable, and Robin sat stiff, glaring at anyone who dared question her conviction. At the defense table Daniel trembled. He shook his hands, leaning in toward his attorney, his voice quiet but insistent. The attorney leaned in to listen, and even though the words were almost drowned out by the babble of movement, one sentence filtered through loud enough to stop the air cold. "I can't protect him anymore." The lawyer's eyes widened, darting to Daniel then to Kody, but Daniel remained fixed downward, his whisper freighted with the weight of a decision that would alter everything. And with that, the day was done, not with closure, but with the threat of a storm that had barely begun to break. The courtroom was more subdued than ever before. Even the rustle of papers and the throat clearing seemed hushed, as if the walls themselves were aware of what lay ahead. The jury stiffly remained in their box, pencils held still but ready. The wives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, each her own tempest of feelings, and at their center sat Daniel, head bent, shoulders slumped, a far younger man than his years. When the bailiff called his name, he stood up, his legs weighed down, as if every step toward the witness stand pulled him further into a pit from which he would never climb back out. His defense attorney sent him a reassuring smile, but Daniel's expression revealed nothing of confidence. He appeared shattered, his eyes dark with sleepless nights and unspoken truths. The oath shook from him, catching on the words in his voice. When he eventually settled into the seat, he wrapped his hands around each other so hard that his knuckles became white. His lawyer stood next to him, speaking softly. "Daniel, can you tell the court why you are here today?" Daniel swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Because I moved money," he said softly. His voice echoed throughout the room, every word heavy with the sting of confession. "I moved money through accounts. I signed documents. I did things I shouldn't have." The gallery wasn't told that Daniel was done, however. A murmur ran through the crowd, journalists writing furiously, but Daniel wasn't yet finished. He raised his head, his eyes glassy but firm. "But it wasn't for me. I didn't keep the money. I didn't want it. I did it because I was told to." The defense lawyer carefully moved a step closer. "Who told you to, Daniel?" His eyes flicked across the room. For a moment, they landed on his mother's, each one staring at him with a different expression. Christine's eyes wet with sorrow, Janelle's filled with quiet support, Mary's sharp and unblinking, and Robin's narrowed with anger. Finally, his gaze reached Kody. His father sat rigid, his jaw locked, his eyes burning holes into his son. "My dad," Daniel replied, the words tumbling loose like rocks from a cliff. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. The jury leaned in. The prosecutor's eyes narrowed. "Tell me what you mean by that," his attorney encouraged. Daniel nodded unsteadily. He'd send me orders. He'd call at midnight, or text, or leave messages. Sometimes he'd give me checks, already signed, and instruct me where to put them. Other times he'd send me emails with account information, instructing me to transfer funds. He said it was for the family, to protect us, to safeguard what was ours from the government, from strangers. I trusted him." The defense attorney picked up a stack of documents from the table. "Your Honor, with permission, I'd like to present exhibits 42 through 58. The judge nodded, and the screens flickered to life as documents were displayed for the jury. Emails appeared, time-stamped late at night, bearing messages like, "Move the funds tonight. Use the second account." Several were signed simply, "Dad." Then there were checks, with Daniel's signature in the deposit field, but Kody's unmistakable handwriting on the front. And finally, text message screenshots. "Don't ask questions. Just do it. It's for the family." The gallery gasped, reporters whispering madly as they struggled to take in every last detail. "Daniel," his lawyer went on, "did you ever think when you took these orders that you were committing a crime?" Daniel shook his head wildly. "No. I believed he knew what he was doing. I believed I was assisting him. Assisting all of us. I didn't want to let him down. I just wanted to be helpful." Tears welled in his eyes, his voice breaking. "My whole life I was taught loyalty was the most important thing. That family first, that we had to trust Dad. So I did. I trusted him. And now I'm the one on trial." The courtroom descended into an uncomfortable hush. The picture of Kody as the proud, immovable patriarch, the man who had guided his family for decades, shuddered. The jury's eyes shifted from son to father, viewing not loyalty, but shackles. The prosecutor rose for cross-examination, his tone piercing. "Daniel, are you telling me you never personally profited from these transfers?" "No," Daniel replied. "Not a single dime." "So all of this, the accounts, the trail of money, the written checks, you're saying it all leads back to your father?" "Yes, and you did as you were told without question." Daniel's voice lowered. He's my dad. I couldn't say no. The prosecutor allowed the silence to loom, then remarked, "Thank you, Daniel. No further questions." The courtroom hummed with murmurs. Reporters clicked away at their laptops. The jurors wrote, some looking at Kody, others at Daniel. The wives sat immobile, their faces masks of pain and sorrow. The judge glanced towards the defense table. Redirect? Daniel's attorney shook his head. No, Your Honor. The witness has testified clearly. The judge nodded. Very well. The witness may be excused. But Daniel did not budge. He gazed at the jury, his words shaking but understandable. I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to betray my dad. But I can't keep pretending. I can't keep covering for him when he never covered me. The courtroom dissolved. Gasp, murmur, even weeping from the gallery. The judge banged her gavel, yelling for order, and then Kody cracked. He shot up from his chair, slamming his fist on the table so hard the sound cracked through the room like thunder. His face flushed red, his eyes blazing with fury. You're lying, he roared, his voice echoing off the walls. You ungrateful liar, Christine sobbed, placing her hands over her face. Janelle stood stock still. Her lips parted in a little "Oh Mary," cleared, icy and unyielding. Robin sprang to her feet, gesturing at Daniel as if to incinerate his words through sheer will. The judge's gavel rang out repeatedly. Order, sit down, Mr. Brown. This is a court of law. But Kody stood trembling, his chest constricted, his glare at the son who had just ripped away the last veil of his authority. The jury sat through every second, their pens abandoned, their eyes wide open. The vision of the patriarch had shattered to pieces. And in that instant, the trial was no longer going to be about Daniel alone. It was going to be about the collapse of Kody Brown. The gavel came down for the last time, the judge's tone slicing through the pandemonium. We will have order in this courtroom. Now. But it was too late. The cliffhanger lingered in the air, sharp and live-wired. Daniel's admission, the proof revealed, and Kody's raging outburst. The secrets of the family had spilled over into the daylight, and nothing could reclaim them. The bailiff's voice boomed out like a bell, informing that the jury had been dismissed to consider. The 12 men and women moved in silence out of the courtroom, their faces impassive masks. The solid wooden door shut behind them, and the sound rang out with finality. For the first time in days, the room was free from the steady beat of testimony, free from the stinging volley of questions and objections. Now, it waited. Raw knotted waiting. Within the courtroom, the quiet was intolerable. Reporters shifted uncomfortably in seats, whispering predictions into phones, glancing back to every slight movement of the family. Cameras stood poised, hungry for the slightest hint of breakdown. The wives sat in their row, 4 women whose lives had interwoven once, but who now appeared as strangers stuck on the same stage. Janelle bent her head, her lips moving in silent prayer. Christine wrung a tissue between her fingers until it disintegrated, her eyes cloudy with tears unreleased. Mary sat stiff, arms crossed, eyes staring at the lacquered wood of the bench in front of her, every fiber of her exuding control. Robin, fidgety and combative, threw angry glances at the prosecutor's table, jaw tightened, loyalty outlined on every line of her body. Kody sat alone, his shoulders against the back of his chair, his fists clasped so tightly the blue veins stood out. The earlier outburst still hung in the air, the sound of his fist on the table, his yell of accusation at his son. He was pale now, but his eyes flamed with a rebellious fire, a man refusing to give in even when the odds had turned firmly against him. Across the aisle, Daniel sat next to his lawyer, his shoulders stooped, his head low. He had not caught his father's eye since the explosion, had not dared look at him. His lips moved infrequently, speaking in a whisper to his lawyer, but the words were swallowed in the surrounding murmurs. He appeared small, fragmented, a son who had borne too much and shattered under the burden. The prosecutor stood up, striding back and forth like a frustrated animal. He was brimming with confidence, but his eyes told of cautious consideration. He had played his hand well. The emails, the checks, the testimony that did not portray Daniel as mastermind, but as pawn. It was now in the hands of the jury. Yet, he couldn't remain seated. Every step on the shiny floor echoed the conviction in his head that Kody's shadow loomed over each bit of evidence. The defense lawyer sat, his voice barely above a whisper as he reassured Daniel. "They'll see it," he whispered. "They'll know you were under stress. They'll comprehend." Yet, even as he spoke, his glance darted anxiously toward the door where the jury waited. His role had been to deflect blame, to turn the spotlight of guilt upon Kody, but trials were a capricious business. He knew that the jury might just as well pronounce Daniel guilty no matter what. The hours dragged on, and then the silence broke. Christine leaned forward to Janelle, her voice low but insistent. "Will they believe him? Will they see what Kody did to him?" Janelle puckered her lips, her eyes sparkling. "I don't know," she breathed. "I just pray they do." Mary, overhearing them, snorted softly. "Praying won't make the truth any different," she growled. Her tone was soft but edged with ice. Christine's gaze swiveled to her, hurt. "You think he is worthy of this? After all that?" "I think," Mary answered bleakly, "that Daniel made decisions, just like the rest of us." Robin jerked her head around, her tone biting. "Don't spin this. Daniel cheated his father to the entire world. He had a decision, and he made the decision to lie." "Lie?" Christine's voice grew higher, shaking. "You read those emails, Robin. You read those checks." The judge's gavel came down once, quieting the argument. The courtroom returned to strained silence, but the harm was already done. The fissures between the wives were no longer silent cracks. They were wide, undisguisable chasms. Outside, journalists congregated on the steps of the courthouse, their voices audible through the doors as individuals came and went. News readers lined up in front of cameras, reporting live to millions tuning in nationwide. "The jury is deliberating," they announced. "Daniel Brown's future, and quite possibly the future of his father Kody Brown, is hanging in the balance. Will the jury find Daniel a victim of manipulation, or an abettor in a sinister hoax?" Hours ticked by. Day gave way to night. The fluorescent lights of the courtroom threw ugly shadows, accentuating creases on tired faces. Individuals shifted uncomfortably in seats, the quiet broken by coughs, the scratch of chair, the occasional sigh. Daniel lay still, his face ashen, his muscles tense with terror. His lawyer set a reassuring hand on his shoulder occasionally, but the boy appeared to be in a world of his own devising, one where honor had set him on the path to destruction. Kody seethed in anger, his gaze narrowing every time it fell on his son. For years, he had ordered loyalty, obedience, respect, to witness his son shatter those bonds in public. Before a judge, a jury, the whole world was a blow to his pride. He could not tolerate. The wives, all mired in their own thoughts, echoed the fractured nature of the family. Janelle's prayers went on quietly. Christine's tears fell unbidden, now uncontrolled. Mary was stiff, her hands clasped neatly, her eyes gazing straight ahead. Robin, always rebellious, muttered to herself, her lips shaping words no one else could hear. Her body coiled like a soldier waiting for battle. Midnight was approaching, and the burden of waiting weighed more forcefully on each soul in the room. The prosecutor had ceased pacing, sitting now with arms crossed, face impassive. The defense attorney's eyes were heavy with fatigue, but his nerves were raw. And then the sound appeared, a knock at the door to the jury room. All heads jerked up. The bailiff hurried over, taking a folded sheet of paper. He presented it to the judge with solemn seriousness, as if the slender sheet of paper held the fate of the world. The judge opened it, her gaze reading the letter. Her expression gave nothing away, but her jaw tightening was sufficient to bring the room into a shared gasping silence. She nodded once and returned the note to the bailiff. The bailiff's voice rang out clearly and strong. "The jury has reached a decision." A gasp passed through the courtroom. The wives stiffened, their faces reflections of fear, anger, or tenuous hope. Daniel shook with a spasm of the hands as he clutched the edge of the defense table. Kody shifted forward, his eyes glinting with intensity, his whole body tense like a coiled spring waiting to break. The reporters scribbled frantically, their whispers filling the gallery. Outside, the news anchors' voices rose with the breaking update, broadcasting the words across the nation. "The jury has reached a decision in the case of Daniel Brown." The gavel struck once, silencing the murmurs. The judge's voice was calm, steady, final. "We will reconvene for the reading of the verdict." The cliffhanger loomed in the room like a guillotine. The verdict rendered, the conclusion imminent, and the destiny of the family poised on the tip of 12 unspoken words. The air inside the courtroom felt thick, as if the very oxygen had been drained and replaced with something heavier, something suffocating. Everyone present knew the moment had come. The jury had reached a verdict. The wives sat frozen in their row, four statues carved from vastly different stones. Janelle's fingers were interlaced so tightly her knuckles turned bone white. Christine shook openly, her cheeks moist, her tissue torn to bits in her hands. Mary sat upright, stiff, her face as immobile as porcelain, inscrutable to anyone brave enough to look. Robin fidgeted restlessly, jaw clenched, eyes firing with hot determination, as if raw power of will could warp reality to suit. At the defense table, Daniel slouched forward, his breathing shallow, his lips mouthing words that no one else could hear. His lawyer was seated beside him, his face tightly controlled, but the tension in his stance betrayed him. On the other side of the aisle, Kody stood over him, not taller but larger than life, his presence suffocating. His anger from before still churned just beneath his skin, his fists balled, his eyes fixed on his son in a mixture of betrayal and disbelief. The jury door creaked open, and 12 men and women marched back in. The faces of each were void, eyes never betraying the burdens they bore. The foreman, a man with creases etched into his face like horizontal lines, held between his fingers the crumpled sheet of paper that lay the fate of the family. The courtroom burst into whispers, then ceased at once as the judge brought her gavel to life. "Court will come to order," she announced strongly. The foreman passed the note to the bailiff, who in turn handed it to the judge. She opened it slowly, her eyes reading the words. For a second she hesitated, her expression revealing nothing. The quiet was oppressive. Reporters leaned forward, pens at the ready, cameras poised to capture the very moment history was made. The judge refolded the paper and handed it to the clerk. "Will the defendant please stand?" Daniel stood on shaky legs, his attorney standing behind him. His breaths were shallow, his heart racing so hard he swore he could hear it in the back of the room. His gaze darted to Christine, who nodded once, her body shaking, and then to Kody, who glared back with a lioness ready to spring. The clerk cleared her throat and started to read. "On the charge of fraud and conspiracy, we, the jury, find the defendant." Time crawled, every ear perked up. Every breath was suspended. "Guilty." The word detonated in the courtroom. Gasps, cries, whispers. It was chaos contained only by the sharp crack of the judge's gavel demanding order. Christine sobbed openly, collapsing against the rail, while Janelle closed her eyes, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. Mary's lips pressed into a thin, satisfied line, as if she had expected nothing else. Robin shook her head violently, her voice breaking as she muttered, "No, no, this is wrong." Daniel stumbled, his knees almost giving way. His attorney held him upright, but his face was white, his eyes sunken. That boy who had breathed "I can't protect him anymore," now stood guilty, convicted on his own evidence. But the drama was not over. The prosecutor rose, his tone firm. "Your Honor, based on the evidence linking Kody Brown to these accounts, we would like an official investigation of his involvement in this conspiracy." Gasps renewed. Everyone stared at Kody. He stood up halfway from his chair, his complexion crimson, his voice booming. "It is a witch hunt. They want to annihilate me because of who I am, because of my family, because of my religion." The judge pounded her gavel. "Mr. Brown, you will stay seated or be taken out of this courtroom." But Kody did not sit. He gestured toward Daniel, his anger coarse and voice cracking. "He's weak, he betrayed his own blood. You think I'd trust him with money? He betrayed me, betrayed all of us." Christine's scream cut the air. "Stop it, Kody, stop accusing him. He's your son." Robin sprang to her feet, staring at Christine. "He is lying, you know it. Kody is innocent." "Enough," Mary's voice sliced through, icy and sharp. For the first time her mask was broken, her anger pouring into the air. "We all knew, we all turned our heads. Don't try to say this is just Daniel's fault, or his father's. We lived under Kody's law, and this is what we got." The gallery erupted in whispers, journalists rushing to get every word. The family was no longer merely fractured. It was shattered in front of the world. The judge rapped the gavel repeatedly. Order, if there is another interruption, I will clear this courtroom. At last, silence reasserted itself, though it was heavy with shock. The judge looked at Daniel. The court holds you guilty. Sentencing will be arranged for a later date. You are remanded into custody. The bailiff moved forward. Daniel's hands shook as the cuffs snapped onto his wrists. Christine wept more loudly, stretching out for him but restrained by another officer. Janelle's face collapsed, silent tears coursing. Robin grabbed at Kody's arm. Furious whispers, while Mary remained quiet, her hard eyes locked on the son being taken away. Daniel spun once before he was escorted through the side entrance. His gaze met Christine's, then Janelle's. He wouldn't look at Robin, he wouldn't look at Mary, and he could not bring himself to look at Kody. The door closed behind him, and its echo sounded like the last ringing of a bell. Outside, the courthouse steps broke into pandemonium. Reporters yelled into cameras. Microphones held out. Daniel Brown guilty of fraud and conspiracy, they yelled. But the larger question, will Kody Brown himself be charged? Speculation ran rampant. Some claimed Daniel's conviction was just the starting point, that prosecutors would now focus entirely on the patriarch. Others maintained the case would be put on hold, that without Daniel's ongoing cooperation, Kody would go free. But everyone was unanimous. On one point, the Brown family dynasty, once mapped out as invincible, was faltering. Within, the wives scattered. Christine ran hastily, weeping, her tears echoing down the corridor. Janelle trailed behind slowly, her pace heavy, her prayer mumbled under her breath. Robin stuck with Kody, whispering urgently, her eyes scanning as if searching for an escape to protect him from what was about to occur. Mary alone walked, her heels tapping against the marble floor, her face inscrutable, but her silence defiant. Kody appeared last, chest thrust forward, his face unyielding as the storm raging about him. Reporters closed in, calling questions. Mr. Brown, did you tell your son to transfer the money? Are you afraid you'll be indicted next? Has your family betrayed you? Kody hesitated at the top of the courthouse steps, the cameras popping, the world watching him. He spoke up, his voice louder and unshakable. This is not finished. They can dismantle my family, but they will never destroy me. I am Kody Brown, and I will fight with every breath in my body. The crowd erupted in questions, the flashes blinding. Behind him, Robin grasped his arm, her face set, but the others, his other wives, his other children, were gone. The family was no longer whole. It was shattered, its cracks exposed to the world. And although the gavel had dropped, although the verdict was in, the real fight, the coming down of a patriarch, and the fall of an empire was only just starting. The cliffhanger hung like thunder, rumbling over faraway hills. Daniel was in shackles, but would Kody join him?